Hi, everybody. Welcome to Education Boutique's first interview vlog. That's interview video blog. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Brooke and I am the lead resource teacher at Education Boutique. And we are very fortunate today to be joined by S.L.Ager, who is, for those of you who don't know Sheena, I'm sure many of you do, is the author of the Caldwelleta Quest trilogy novels, which, Sheena, you may want to explain this better than I do in just a moment, but they're a unique series of vocabulary novels specifically designed for the 11 plus and SATs exams. And what's unique about them is that they have a built-in dictionary on every page. So it really helps students to enhance those vocabulary skills for their exams. Is there any, have I done that justice, Sheena? Would you like to extend on that?
I think you've done it complete justice, actually, Brooke. Yeah, they're a series of novels that I've coined as vocabulary novels. And yeah, I wrote them because my son wasn't a reader. He would have given up his Xbox for life rather than read a classic book. So we literally wrote the first one together, and we incorporated lots of tricky vocabulary that we'd come across during our sort of studying journey. And then, yeah, we define them on the page along with synonyms and antonyms and parts of speech. And also the definitions are rewritten so they're child friendly. So yeah, you did it. Really,
great. Yes, great. And Lucy and I have been very fortunate to be able to collaborate with you, and we've created the workbooks and the notebooks for the first two books in the series. The workbooks as a chapter by chapter comprehension and creative writing exercises for children preparing for those exams. And you also have another verbal reasoning book, is that correct?
So the books that I collaborated with Education Boutique, and which I will say here, Brooke did most of the heavy lifting, and the book is a constant bestseller. That's the book with the green triangle in the top right hand corner. And those books are more geared, they're standard written answers, and they're more geared probably towards the super selective schools and independent schools. Whereas the new workbook there with the blue triangle in the top right hand corner, that's multiple choice. We've called it verbal skills because it's not got any reasoning in it in terms of like the GL coded reasoning, but it has got what parents might understand as verbal reasoning for the CEM tests. But it's got about 40 comprehensions in it, but they're all multiple choice. So it's very different to the books that we collaborated on.
So your range of books, sorry to interrupt, your range of books provide for sort of both exam types.
It does, yeah.
All exam types.
That was exactly the idea, to cover all sorts of exam types for the UK schools. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know we both felt very passionately about this, but all of your workbooks have answers. They all include answers.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And obviously the workbook that we collaborated on, Brooke, also got a kind of rubric at the back which explains to parents what is required for each exercise.
What skills.
What skills are required. But I've never ever produced a workbook.
I know you get asked, following you on social media, I know that's a question you get asked quite often about answers.
And I literally, the prerequisite was there had to be scissor marks so that a parent knows they can cut out those answers and hide them, because one of my children used to write down the answers and hide them in her bedroom. Note the her.
Very clever. Very clever. And yes, I do often comment on the posts I see as well, because those answers took a lot of time. So they definitely have very thorough answers that will hopefully parents and students will find very very useful and helpful. So I've got a few questions to ask you. First of all, congratulations on the release of the third and final book in your trilogy, the Caldwelleta Quest, Cat's Eye. How does it feel to have completed the trilogy, Sheena?
It felt like a real accomplishment and a little bit of relief, because it is really hard work. In writing something that, because I didn't intend it to be a trilogy, because I didn't know whether the first book would even sell one copy. I wrote it, you know, for my son, with my son, and thought, okay, let's give this a go. And, you know, it was well received. So then I thought, okay, I'll write the second one and then the third. But I did always know what the ending was going to be. So it felt like a real accomplishment, but yeah, also relief, if I'm
Yes,
honest.
yes.
I just sort
Absolutely.
of
Yeah.
hard work.
And I love that. I love how your story has evolved from you were doing it for your son to help your son prepare for his exams.
Yeah.
And I mean, he must have had some input into the storylines as well.
Well, not so much input into the way the story would go, but what he
Yeah.
did, and what my daughter did as well, is they basically became my beta readers. So whatever I wrote, they would read it and then feed back on that. And it was usually quite harsh criticism. They'd never say this, they'd never do that, they wouldn't do that. That's boring. That needs more description. But it was really, really, really helpful, because if your readers can't feed back, then it's just your head, and that's a little bit kind of hubristic, I suppose. So
Yeah.
but they're too old now. They won't read them. They
Oh,
won't read. I made Jude read Cat's Eye, and he was like, oh, do I have to? Because he's 15 now, you know. So
yeah.
but he did feedback. And interestingly, most of what they said, I would say 95% of it, I always heeded their advice. It was always right. It was always wise. So yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Fantastic.
So
So
yeah,
Sheena, the next question I have for you is, what would you say? I mean, I know you are in touch with a lot of your readers, you're in contact with a lot of your readers, but does anything stick out for you at sort of the most treasured piece of feedback that you have received from one of your readers? Is there a highlight for you?
yes. Well, yeah, there is one specific highlight from a boy who emailed me, who basically said he felt that the books had been instrumental in his success, in gaining a place to a grammar school. But I would say I get lots and lots of messages from children, lots of photographs are sent to me via social media of them reading the books, and just the things that they say. And you know, I've had like little vlog recordings like this of children reading, and so I would say all of those are, and I don't want it to sound cliche, because it sounds really cliche, but
Yeah.
it really is. I've had, in fact, actually, Brooke, it was on one of the children, who's a great book reviewer and a blogger, on Christmas Day sent me a
Oh,
picture of our workbook.
oh,
And it did bring a tear to my eye.
yeah,
They want to do that, and I mean, I don't know if it's their parents or the kids that are doing it, but yeah, it's all that feedback, that the kids reading the book and the kids that enjoy it. And obviously not all kids enjoy it, because you can't please all children. It could, it's quite a genre specific book. But yeah, it's that feedback that,
yeah, yeah.
and it really does make my day when kids contact me, obviously via their parents.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
So kids, if you're watching, keep doing it.
Please
Keep
do.
sending, yeah, keep sending in your reviews. Um, we sort of touched on this before the next question. You said you started, writing a book and you didn't know it was going to be a series, a trilogy. But there are some unexpected twists and turns, Sheena, in The Cat's Eye. Did you know how it was going to end pretty early on in the piece,
So
or did you surprise yourself?
so I always, even when I wrote the first book, I knew that there was more to what I wanted to say, but I don't think I would have said it had the book not sold a copy, because it just takes so much work to do what I did. I always knew how everything would wrap up. So who was kind of what and why things happened. But I didn't quite know how they got there, Brooke. So there were a few, there's two schools of thought for writers, really. And putting it crudely, one's a pantser, and that means you write by the seat of your pants.
Oh, okay, yes.
The other one is a plotter, okay, and they can be called, the nicer terms are gardeners and architects. So I sit between the two, and it's only when I wrote the first book, I didn't have a clue what I was or what I was doing, you know, I just sort of wrote into the dark. But now I sit between the two, and I am not some people write outlines that are thousands of words long and stick to it. I can't do that. I kind of know my beginning and I know my ending. And then the bit in the middle is the bit that comes to me as I write. And because I hear lots of writers that make really strict outlines, they don't follow them. So they spend weeks writing the outline and then they veer off. So I'm kind of halfway in between. So I knew my beginning and I knew my ending, but I didn't quite know how things got there. And that, I think that's the joy of things. And sometimes you get stuck and I think, oh, what am I going to do next? Blah, blah, blah. And then I'll go out for a dog walk, or I'll be doing the hoovering, and it comes to me. It's really weird.
And you must change things sometimes as well. Get like a fresh idea and think, oh, that would replace that, you know, the previous idea I had, and build upon it.
And that doesn't stop until your very final edit, until you know. But I guess you've got to stop somewhere, because you could keep.
Yeah, you would keep going. And you have come to the end of this trilogy. Will you miss Claire and Ben, your main characters?
Well, I'm writing a prequel.
So they include, so that is one of my questions further on. I was going to touch on that. I wasn't sure how far back in time the prequel went.
Well, let's talk about that later then.
Okay.
Will I miss them? I don't think I'll need to miss them for the minute.
Okay. So that's okay, a sign of things to come. So I am interested in your process, which we did just briefly, or we just did touch on, so that was how you wrote the story. But in terms of your process of, you have these footnotes down the bottom of each page, and they are the definitions for challenging vocabulary in the text. So in terms of your process of putting the vocabulary into the text, Sheena, do you write it just thinking as you're going, and then go back and replace certain words with more difficult synonyms? What is your process with the vocabulary?
So that's evolved. Okay. So when I wrote the first book, naturally, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. And when I wrote the first book took me 3 years, because it was all new to me, and my process was different. I would write, then I would edit and edit and edit and edit until I felt it was perfect. And then what I hadn't bargained for was, you know, it goes to a store. Well, if you were published by a publisher, a book goes through a certain process. And because I wanted to produce something that was as good as I could possibly produce, I put my book through this process and I paid for it privately. So what I hadn't bargained on was when it went to the story editor, who's a real stickler. She edits David Walliams's books. And it came back and she gave me so many sort of directions that I rewrote a lot of it. And then I sent it to a beta reader. And again, she gave me lots of advice. So I rewrote lots of that. And then when it went to my copy editor, line by line grammar, she suggested changes. So what I realized was, what I'd done in the beginning, a lot of it wasted a lot of time, because a lot of things were changed and didn't stay in the story. So what I do now, my process is very different. I write a really rough draft. So I get the story down, and it's awful. If you were to read it, it's full of typos, notes to self. It's just a complete mess. And so I do that. And then I go back and do a second draft, and then I tidy it up using much more sophisticated vocabulary. Then it goes out to a beta reader. Then it comes back to me, and then I will rewrite it using the vocabulary I want in there. Then it goes to a story editor, comes back, another rewrite, then it goes to a copy editor, then it comes back and another rewrite. And then only before the final proofread do I actually get the words in that I want to be in there for the publication. So that's
Wow.
when the final words and the final footnotes go in, because otherwise too much can change. But
Yes.
in the first book, I didn't know that. So it's a process, and it's a process that I've designed, because obviously
Yes.
I don't know of many other books that are or any other books in the UK that are like this.
No,
So
it's very unique.
it was between me and the editor to actually design the process.
Yes.
And
So you,
it caught my editor on the hop as well, because
yeah.
she'd kind of priced for the job for the definitions, and then realized it was taking her twice as long. So obviously we renegotiated, because I wouldn't do that to somebody. But yeah, it was a huge process. So the actual final cut is right at the very end.
Yeah. And a huge, like you said, a learning curve for you. And I guess you've perfected this system for yourself and what works best for you and your writing.
Still perfecting.
Yes. Still perfecting
Yeah.
it. Sheena, we have students and parents who have at Education Boutique who have absolutely fallen in love with the Caldwelleta quests. The fact that it is such a fantastic learning tool and makes it unique and purposeful. Would you agree that that is part of its success, that it is an enjoyable storyline and it is a purposeful and meaningful learning tool, study aid?
So I was torn right from the beginning with this book, because again, it was new ground. I wasn't sure whether to give it an educational looking cover. I wasn't sure whether to give it a novel looking cover, because I knew that selling it on Amazon, if you put the cover on that I've got, which is like a novel cover, yet
Yes.
it's in the educational categories, a lot of people might just scroll past it and think, oh, what's that doing there? That's got nothing to do with the 11 plus. So that was the first hurdle I had to get over, hence the big badge on the front that says 11 plus. Then the other hurdle was, how much story and pacing do I sacrifice in order to get in the vocabulary? Now, in the first book, which is actually the most important book, I probably sacrificed a bit of pace and story to get in an awful lot of vocabulary, because I was writing it for Jude. And so the first book is story, but I'd say it's much more vocabulary based than story. But in books 2 and books 3, because book 1 had been so well received, so there's 3,000 word definitions in book 1, along with hundreds of synonyms and antonyms. So the story is 50,000 words. The definitions are 50, so it's a 100,000 word book. In book 2 and book 3, I worked much more on story and pace. So ironically, I think kids will like book 2 and book 3 more than book 1, because they're faster and they're more pacey. And I took out 1,000 definitions. So there's only 2,000, I say only, it's still a lot, 2,000 definitions in Race for the Gold and 2,000 definitions in Cat's Eye, because I felt it was pacier. So yeah, I think it's book 1 is the hardest. Book 2 and 3, I think, are much more fun, but will still give them a very purposeful vocabulary experience. And again, book 1 was always, the slight unknown. So, but what I did do in book 1 was I started off with the vocabulary being easier, building up to a peak in chapter 17, which is really tough vocabulary, and then it eases right off to practically nothing, so that the child can enjoy the ending without, sort of seeing all those
stop and starting.
But while we're talking, Brooke, I would say I get asked this question so often: how should I use this book? And I say, just use it like any other book. If you were reading a book, you would not stop and look up every single word in a dictionary that you didn't know. If you were reading a Charles Dickens book, you would not stop, because if you did, you wouldn't get anywhere. I would say just read the book as normal. And if you want to look up a word because you really don't understand the kind of context, then look it up. But otherwise, just getting the gist of it, it goes in almost like osmosis. It's like, one parent said to me, it's like vocabulary by stealth.
Yes.
The fact that they're just seeing it on the page, it will go in. And I mean, in an ideal world, I would say read the books twice. But, you know, I know that's not always going to be ideal, but for really vocabulary heavy tests, such as CEM, or for the really tough schools like Henrietta Barnett, St. Olave's, some of the privates, you know, like St. Paul's, where, you know, these children need a huge vocabulary, then I would say read the books twice. And, you know, some parents say kid loved it. Some parents say kid couldn't get into it. I say to them, look, this is for a test. It's up to you how much you push your child to read them, but no matter what, they are going to help their vocabulary, because it's just all the classic vocabulary under 3 roofs, if you like.
Absolutely. And Sheena, also your books would very much help anyone with English as an additional language as well. I think that's really important to point out, isn't it?
It's interesting, actually, and thanks for bringing that up, Brooke. I've just had a Canadian teacher contact me, an ESL teacher, English second language teacher, and he said, look, I happened upon your books on my Kindle device, and he said he's now using it to teach all his students. And I'm seeing all these sales in Canada of the Kindle because his students are a bit older.
Yes.
And, you know, he said it's just absolutely brilliant for them because they can just tap, you know, on the Kindle and look up the definitions. And he said, yeah, it's great. And he's actually given me the heads up and said, you need to promote more in the USA and Canada as ESL, as opposed to the independent school tests that they are, because there is an American version as well, Brooke. So
yes,
with America, so the book has been completely rewritten and repunctuated for American English, if anybody wants it. And also, Brooke, the workbook will be coming out soon in American English too.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, great.
I've just
okay, perfect. What advice would you give to students for their own writing? If you could give them a piece of advice, what would it be?
Okay, so I'm going to split that out straight away. So we're talking about, it's so different. So if kids are doing creative writing for SATs at school, then obviously the SATs requirements are slightly different to possibly independent school requirements in terms of what people are looking for and in terms of, you know, which 11+ test you're sitting. So for instance, the CSSE test in Essex, it's 2 pieces, but they can only use 6 or 7 lines. What I would say is, what I see most in 11+ is children overwriting. So they throw in too many adjectives, they throw in too many color adjectives, then they'll throw in too many adverbs, and it's all squashed into one sentence. And we're losing any sense of story because we're just tripping up over this overwriting. And I'm sure you've seen that as well, Brooke. And, you know, I've just seen your wonderful, because obviously, so Brooke, I have a Facebook group, guys, and Brooke does some free marking in there in a very kind of education boutique. They choose a piece. And so you know what I mean by this, Brooke.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
So what I would say, kids, is so for best practice at home, okay, you cannot write anything in one draft. It's not possible, okay? So, and I can hear the kids groan, oh, do I have to do this more than once? Yes, at home, I'm afraid to make your writing sing, you must write out a draft and then you must edit it, okay? Now, if you can be bothered to type it out, or you've typed it out, a really good tip is run your typed first draft through a free grammar tool like Grammarly. I'm not affiliated to Grammarly, but they will pick up all the usual suspects of your your punctuation errors. And it's great because it tells you what they are. Okay, so first draft, always go back and edit. And when you edit, so second draft will be so much better than your first. And most of the time, guys, it should be shorter. You should be taking out superfluous words that you don't need. Try and write in the active voice, unless you're writing specifically for persuasion or almost denial writing. Write in the passive voice if it's pure creative writing and story. So take out your was, okay? Take out your filler words. He felt, he began. You don't need to do that. Upgrade your verbs, upgrade your nouns, and keep it simple. Keep it simple. And don't go into the dictionary and start looking up fancy smancy words. I don't think examiners want them. I think they probably roll their eyes, maybe 1 or 2 or 3, depending on the piece, but don't overload it because it just drags the writing down. So that's what I would say. And practice. Again, it's just like anything,
Yes.
like learning to play the violin. The more you write, the better you'll become. But the learning only comes from editing.
Fantastic. That's fantastic advice, Sheena. Thank you so much. So next, let's touch on this prequel then.
Yeah.
Yes, exciting.
So obviously the books have been well received. I finished the trilogy, although I've left the trilogy a little bit open-ended.
That was one of my next questions. It has been left quite open-ended. Do you think you may do a 4th book in the series?
I didn't want to close that door, and I also like things to be left a little bit like that. I watched something on Netflix recently. I think it was a 15, so our pupils can't watch it. It's called Behind Her Eyes, and it was the first thing I've watched in years where I could not call that ending at all, and I was absolutely gobsmacked by the ending. Excuse the vernacular there. And I wanted to leave that kind of feeling whereby it was finished but not finished, if you know what I mean. So
I think it leaves the door open, but also for a child's imagination, reading this, they can take it where they would like it to go,
and that's
as
the
well
other thing.
In their own mind.
I wanted to leave an ending whereby they could come to their own conclusions, absolutely, Brooke. So that was my intention. I don't want to tell the reader what to think. I want them to understand the story, but imagine everything in their own head, But the prequels, the prequels were born out of me realizing, because parents are writing to me all the time, asking me what age the trilogy is aimed at. So the trilogy is aimed at the beginning of year 5, and the first book is really tricky even for year 5. However, lots of year 4s have read it, and one of my beta readers, Brooke, you won't believe this, he's year 3. He's amazing, this child.
Wow.
Okay, so in fact I have 2 year 3 beta readers. So some children will devour it in year 3, but if your child finds it really difficult, do not despair. Year 5, beginning of year 5, or summer holidays at the end of year 4. But what I realized is there was a real need for year 3 and 4. So for these vocabulary novels for children starting year 3, hence the prequels. And I just thought, so the characters are different, but think Star Wars. Okay, I'm not comparing myself to that franchise, but so the first 3 actually became the last 3, if you like, because obviously they were successful films. So what could they do? They went back and wrote prequels. So what I'm writing now is completely related to the trilogy, but it's set in the 12th century.
So that's what I was going to ask, if I was allowed to ask. Is it based on the knights from time long ago, because we sort of pick up on with what their mission is, and we hear bits. I don't want to give too much away. I have to be careful with what I'm saying here for people who haven't read it. But in your first book, you go into, you go back in time to explain what the setting is in the present. So I was wondering whether it would delve into that history and into that background.
So it's all the kind of the same premise, in that there is magic, strange things happening, but less so because we've gone back, and the Gwaith gem bracelet is in it, but we actually go back to where it was initially stolen, and when Prince Llywelyn, do you hear that?
Yeah.
Prince Llywelyn accidentally, or is lured to kill his faithful dog Gelert. So we're going right back to there. But the characters are different. But that's going to be part of the big twist as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So
so stay tuned.
Yeah. But it's set in the 12th century, but I will put a disclaimer. I've done a lot of research, but I'm going to put a disclaimer at the front of the book to say that all of the historical all the citations are loose. So it's not, I don't want children reading it to think that the historical facts are actually set in stone, because give or take a few years there's poetic license there, the castle might not be exactly how it should have been, because I want it to be my castle type thing. So, but I will put a little disclaimer at the front of the book. So but it's good. I'm kind of enjoying it. It's tricky because I have to keep going back to the other books as well to make sure everything ties in. But so it'll be aimed at years 3 and 4. Still be tricky, vocabulary on the page, but I'll actually be able to say to parents, no, you start with these and then you go with those.
Yeah, fantastic. And so I have one more question for you. Out of all, how many definitions did you say altogether in the 3 books?
So first, Tangled Time has got 3,000, and Race to the Gold and Cat's Eye have got 2,000 respectively. But with all the synonyms and antonyms,
it's a lot of words.
A lot of words. They're all around 100,000 words each, the books.
And is there a particular word, a particular or a definition that just really stands out in your mind that, I don't know, maybe you've taken to using in everyday life a little bit more?
I wouldn't say so. I'll say the trickiest part, and this is what the editor struggled with this as well, was so obviously a word can be an adjective, the same word can be a noun, an adjective, or even a verb. It was deciding what part of speech to use when we used words as adjectives or verbs in the text, and we decided most of the time to default to the verb, because that seemed the easiest way for a child to learn the word. Sometimes, even though the word appears in the text as an adjective, we might define it as a verb. Obviously, we will give the infinitive form of the verb, but because we were caught between a rock and a hard place, how do we define this? And we had to make up our own rules. So that was the thing that sticks out more than anything. But is there one definition? No, I don't think there is. I mean, me and my copy editor, we call it the definition derby. And literally, I'll be honest with you, it's my least favorite part of the work because it's not creative. It's literally just me looking up we only use the Oxford English Dictionary. That is the only dictionary that counts to a copy editor in the UK. So beware, guys, when you're looking up words on Google, because they use Merriam-Webster and it's American. So it's worth, we subscribe to the Oxford English Dictionary. And unless a word was actually listed in the dictionary as in its own adjectival form. It went as a verb, but you know, I'd literally just spent hours rewriting the Oxford English Dictionary because we couldn't just pull out the definition because of copyright.
Yes, of course.
Otherwise we're breaching copyright, and we wanted to make it easy for the children. So yeah, I sort of became cross-eyed and yeah, no, I don't enjoy the definition part.
Be good to have on a trivia team, Sheena.
Yes. And it's interesting, it's only when you go back and you look at the mistakes you made when you think you're doing it correctly, and it's just because of the repetition, and you know, it's like yeah, so I don't like doing the definitions at all.
Sheena, thank you so much for your time today. And for everybody watching this, Sheena's books and the accompanying workbooks are all available on Amazon.
Yeah.
And Sheena also runs a very successful Facebook group. The name of that Facebook
with the help of Brooke.
And the name of that Facebook group is?
It's the Caldwelleta Quest writing, creative writing, reading, and I can't remember a long title, for the 11 plus and ESL. And if you put in the Caldwelleta Quests on Facebook, you'll see it'll pop up, and I've got a page on there as well. And I've now got a YouTube channel as well, Brooke, because lots of people kept asking me for videos. So I just do, it's not fancy schmancy, it's me going, hi, I'm just going to talk about this today, and you know, that sort of thing. But you know, that's proving to be quite successful as well.
Oh, good, so fantastic. And I think the Facebook page and your YouTube channel will also complement the will complement the Facebook page. The Facebook page is a great resource for parents and students looking for support, and maybe they're not sure where to start. They can submit writing piece. Yes, that's the group. Sorry, the group.
Yeah, sorry,
the
that's
group.
okay. Cool.
Yes.
The Facebook Brooke is an admin of the group, and she and Lucy actually mark pieces every 2 weeks, and that's a free service in the group. But also, if you want your pieces marked, folks, then I strongly recommend that you have Brooke professionally mark them, because it really will improve your children's work. Nothing like a good critique can help your child's writing move on.
And we have very budget-friendly marking schemes and packages that people can contact us at any time to find out about. But yes, the Facebook page is a fantastic resource. People are uploading their children's writing samples. They're getting free advice, free feedback from educational authors, tutors, educators. You've really chosen a great bunch of admins to support that page, if I say so myself.
Yes, thank you, Brooke. And you know, I'd like to just say thanks to Brooke and Lucy of Education Boutique. You've been great collaborators. I've learned so much from both of you. Lucy is such a whizzo businesswoman, and you, Brooke, with your, you know, you're a teacher, I'm not, so I've really learned a lot from you. So thanks so much for your time and your help. You know,
no, as have we from you, and with, you know, you've helped us take off with the publishing side of Education Boutique as well. So yeah, so thank you for your time today.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.